Hello everyone, Carnasa here, and welcome back to a realism overhaul video on this channel. And this is going to be a little bit different from what I usually do in the fact that this isn't Kerbal Gets Real. No, this is more of a tutorial-esque kind of video, I guess you could call it. So this is, as the title may suggest, 10 tips and tricks that I wished I'd known when I started playing RP1. And I'm going to be the first to say I am not the definitive authority on this. These are just kind of things that I'd wished I'd known when I'd started playing that kind of really helped me actually play, and hopefully it will help a few of my viewers out as well if they want to start playing Realism Overhaul and RP1. But anyway, enough with this introduction, let's get straight on to number 1. So, number 1, diameter tooling. And what I mean by this is, well, we're in the vehicle assembly building in a brand new save. And what I want to show is, well, you can see we've got a 1x1 tank here, 1 meter in diameter and 1 meter in length. So if we tool this, we can see it's going to cost us 10,650 tons. I'm using a service module here. They are more expensive than regular tanks, but it doesn't really matter for the point that I'm trying to show. Anyway, what we can do is we can go up to 2 meters in diameter and then 1 meter in length, and we can tool that. And we can see that goes up to 27,400 tons, which is quite considerably more. But if we did 1 meter by 2 meters, if I can click it correctly, there we go, it still only remains around 10,750 tons. So what I'm trying to say is if you stretch your tanks out, you don't get quite the same amount of volume inside. So a 1 meter diameter by a length of 2 meters is actually slightly less than a 2 meter diameter tank with a length of 2 meters. But you can kind of get a lot more for your money by doing it this way. And then what we can see is I can actually go in and I can tool this. So it's 10,650 tons. Brilliant. We'll tool that. We want this 1x1 meter tank. I'm not sure what we'd use this 1x1 meter service module for, but you know what? We're going to do it. And then what I can show you is that actually, if we increase the length of this, so we go in and tool it now, it's actually only going to cost us 1,800 funds, which means that, well, if you keep the diameter the same, what you're basically doing, if you tool a certain diameter, then keep using that width. Try and keep using that width as much as possible, because if you need a little bit more, just stretch it out on the length a bit, because really the tooling costs aren't going to go up that much if we go, well, if we extend the length. See, that's only gone up to 2,300, whereas if I went for a 2 meter by 10 meter. So we've just gone our diameter has gone up a little bit more, but if we tool this now, see, that's 28,000. It is a dramatic difference. And so when you tool a diameter, it kind of saves it as a diameter that you've tooled, and it just basically means that you can make things a lot cheaper just by stretching out the length. That is a tooltip in the actual opening menus. Although, like I said, this is things that I'd wished I'd known, and I kind of didn't really understand how much that made a difference and what it did. So that's why this is number 1. So number 2, reusability, and it's kind of along the same theme of tooling. So what I mean by this is it's highlighted in my first 4 episodes of Kerbal Gets Real, especially. Once you've designed a rocket, use it as much as you possibly can, because that way, well, you're going to be saving loads of money on tooling costs, and well, it just saves you a lot of money and is basically, yeah, just a way of saving funds. So if you can design a single rocket and launch it like 8 times to fulfill a contract, 8 different times, do that, because then you've only got to design 1 rocket. You only need to tool things once, and well, yeah, you don't have to spend loads of time designing it either, so I suppose that's another little bit of a bonus. But speaking of reusability, that is going to go straight into point number 3. So number 3, like I said, carrying on from number 2, it's going to be launch vehicle design. So when I first started playing RP1 and Realism Overhaul, I built a custom launch vehicle for every single mission that I flew. Very similar to kind of what you'd mainly do in stock KSP. That gets really boring really quickly. And a good way to combine the fact of using reusability into, well, your crafts is to build launch vehicles. And what I do for that is I've talked about it a little bit in my build episodes, but get a tank, fill it up with lead, fill it to the weight that you want to carry to orbit, and then design a rocket that roughly has around 9,400 meters per second of delta V in. And then you've got your lovely window over here, which is the sub-assembly section, and that's why I've come into the Kerbal Gets Real save, just to show this. So you can see I've got loads in here. I've got all of the ones that I've been using in the series, and basically, once you've built your craft that you are going to be using in orbit, you can see how much it weighs, and you can go down here, and I have named all of these so I can see how much they can lift. So say I've got something that weighed maybe, I don't know, like 12 tons, I would have a look and I would see, well, the Icarus 2 LEO LV, low Earth orbit launch vehicle, can take 14 tons to low Earth orbit. So what I do is I will grab that, and then after a little bit of loading, hopefully it doesn't take too long. It's taking a while already. Come on, just load. Please load. My Kerbal is being very slow. Anyway, there we go. So yeah, we can just drag this launch vehicle out, attach it to the craft that we would have already made, and that's it. And then you are ready to launch the spacecraft that you have done. So, number 4, aggressive spending. And what I mean by this is, well, any money that you've got sitting in the bank is wasted money. And I mean, I'm not really one to talk at the moment, having about 5 million funds in my actual funding in the Kerbal Gets Real series. But I'm at a point now where that doesn't particularly matter. If I go into my Kerbal construction time, you can see my upgrades. Well, we've got 22 build points in rate 1 and everything else is looking pretty good. And actually, I've got 15 build points to spend. I'll get onto doing those at some point. But yeah, early game, and I really talk about this in episodes 3 and 4. So what I did in episode 3 was I actually picked up the first satellite contract and the first scientific satellite contract way before I was able to do them. That gave me such a big advance that I was then able to go into my upgrades, pour all of that money, pretty much all of that money, into my vehicle assembly building and research and development. And then that way, my rates that I was building at and my science, I was gaining them very quickly. And it actually allowed me to get my first orbit in 1954. And it wasn't even a caveman method. It was quite a well-constructed method of achieving orbit. But yeah, so ideally what you want to do is you want to spend all of the money that you get, especially early game. When you get to later game, it doesn't matter so much, although, like I said, I do need to go in and spend a lot of that money. I'll see how I can get on with doing that. So number 5 is RCS thrusters, and what I mean by this is how useful they are in early game RP1, and actually not just early game, throughout an RP1 career. Basically, in early game, they are an engine that has an unlimited amount of ignitions, and you can get them before you unlock things like the HA-10 Mid and the HA-10 Advanced, so they're great for doing deep space maneuvers, and that is why I have come to my communications network that I set up in 1960, because I used an RCS thruster to put 4 of these in, well, an orbit where they could all talk to each other. They were roughly 90 degrees apart from each other, and 6 years on, they are still pretty much in the exact same place that they were when I left them. They have moved ever so slightly, but that was all thanks due to RCS thrusters. And another thing that you can do is, even when you've got, say, a transfer stage, like take my Minotaur transfer stage, what I do is when I went to the moon with that in my last episode, I obviously used that LR87 LH2 engine to do most of the burn. But Mechjeb, which I will get onto later on, doesn't always do it perfectly. It's not a wizard, it does make mistakes. So what I like to do, rather than actually lighting up that engine once again, is use RCS to get you the rest of the way. Usually, you do have enough power in that RCS to get you that last little distance, and it does work really well. And I guess one reason why RCS is just so fantastic in Realism Overhaul is the fact that engines aren't, well, deeply throttleable. They're not throttleable from 0 to 100%, and they do have a limited amount of ignitions. So you can just use RCS to really fine-tune those orbits that you want to fine-tune, and they have such fine control because they really do not output a lot of thrust that, well, yeah, like I said, this communications network has barely moved in 5 years because I was able to put it in such a perfect orbit, all 4 of them with each other. Well, this is a bit bizarre. My game isn't letting me actually control anything. What is going on? What have I done? Oh, that looks promising. Oh no, I'm pressing escape, but the menu isn't coming up. How strange. So after that weird little bit of a glitch with my game, I really don't know what was going on there. We're going to be going on to number 6, which is of course Mechjeb. And, well, particularly P.V.G, Primer Vector Guidance in particular. So, Mechjeb, it is a bit controversial within the KSP community. You either love it or you hate it. It is the Marmite of KSP. I am definitely in the side that loves Mechjeb. I use it for all of my launches now. I mean, I can't remember the last time I launched a rocket in Realism Overhaul without using Mechjeb, probably when I was doing my first orbital rockets. But anyway, what I want to say about this is actually when I first started playing Realism Overhaul, I did not use Mechjeb. I didn't use it for my launches. I used it occasionally for my maneuver planners, but the reason why I didn't use it is because I hadn't really configured it properly to actually launch, and it was causing all of my launches to fail. And, well, yeah, you don't want your launches to fail, so that's why I didn't use it. But since starting this career and actually doing the last career that I did, which I obviously didn't record, I have used it pretty much entirely. So the issue I think I was having was I didn't have emit coast ticked on the ascent guidance. You can see it over on the right there. And basically what was happening is I was having a coast stage in my rockets that should not have had a coast stage. So it was causing all kinds of issues with ullage and igniting stages, and it just was a very bad time in particular. So what I like to do with ascent guidance is I usually pick a target periapsis and apoapsis to be circular. I don't think I've ever really done it where it's not been circular, except for doing the Sun Synchronous Satellite contract, but that's a completely different story. And I like to go somewhere around 160 to 180. Then the booster pitch rate, what I set that to is gonna be dependent on the thrust to weight ratio of the rocket. So a low thrust to weight ratio rocket, I would like to put that at maybe somewhere between 80 to 120 meters per second. And something with a really, really high thrust to weight ratio, I'll go down to, say, 50 meters per second. So that's when the actual pitch programs start. The pitch rate, I very rarely touch that. I think I usually keep that at 0.5 degrees a second. I have changed that maybe once or twice just to make sure that everything works properly. And yeah, that's basically it. Now, something that I've done on this launch, which I usually don't do, is auto-deploy solar panels. Usually I have that option turned off because it can deploy solar panels that are tucked away in fairings, and that can, well, it can cause an issue. So just be wary of that. And yeah, hopefully Mechjeb PVG should get you a damn efficient orbit every time you launch with it. It's amazing. It's really amazing. And obviously, Mechjeb isn't just used for ascent guidance. No, you can use it to do all of your maneuvers and all other kinds of fancy wizardry. But I will be getting into that a little bit in the next number on this list, and it is going to be about using my transfer window planner. So the transfer window planner. Now, this is something that I actually put up very, very early on in my career. Basically, I think it was a climate satellite that I had to fulfill a contract, and I decided to put it into the plane of the moon so it would serve another purpose. Basically, this thing is completely dead now. It's got no control, it's got no batteries, but it is one of my most important craft because whenever I want to figure out when I've got a transfer window, I come back to this, and what I do is I'll show you exactly what I do now. So, despite the fact that it's got no batteries, what we can do is, well, we can get rid of this. We don't need that anymore. We'll go into map view and say, I want to see when a good transfer window for Mars. No, not Mars. We'll go for Venus. So we're going to set Venus as our target, and then we're going to go into Mechjeb. We are going to go to Maneuver Planner, and once we have done that, we are going to set up the section where it says advanced transfer to another planet. Now, what I can do is hopefully it will load. There we go, it will load. So we do want to include our capture burn because 9 times out of 10, we are actually going to want to capture at the planet that we are going to. Right, so what I can do is we've now got our pork chop selection up. So basically, the lower down here you are, the quicker you will get to your target. The closer over to the left you are, that is, well, the sooner that it will take. Anyway, so now that we've got this up, what we can do is we can create a node, and the transfer window planner will find the best possible part in there if you select lowest delta V. So that has set us up with a transfer to Mars that is going to cost us 3,532 meters per second of delta V, and it's going to be in 328 days. Now, in order to make this a transfer window planner, what you can do is you can get up Kerbal alarm clock and you can add an alarm. So what I like to do is I like to name these after the planet that I'm going to, so Mars, and then what I like to do is to put the actual delta V that it's going to cost to get there. So for this, I'd put maybe Mars 3532, 3532, and now I know that in 328 days, and this will stay up on here, that I've got a transfer window to Mars in 328 days, and it will cost me 3,532 delta V to get there. And then I can see how much delta V, so it's going to cost about 2,000, no, about 3,500 to capture. It won't really cost that much, I don't think, but yeah. So I would like to pack maybe 3,000 delta V for when I actually get to Mars to actually capture. Anyway, so yeah, you can add the alarm, and that's done. And then it's added to our Kerbal alarm clock, and we can see, I already had one up for around then anyway, but in Mars in 328 days. That's rather bizarre that we've got one coming up in 113 days as well. Oh well. Anyway, so yeah, that's what that does. Now, I know there are dedicated programs for planning out transfer windows, and there is one with Kerbal Alarm Clock. However, I have found this works for me. This is the way that I have always done it. It means I can get my transfer windows exactly when I want them. And yeah, it's just a way that has really worked for me. Now, in order to actually set this up, I didn't really need to do anything. You can just put up a probe core if that's all you really want. What you want to do is you want to launch into the plane of the moon, and then that way you'll be in the plane of the moon with this thing. So any maneuvers that you plan with this thing, you know that when you launch into the plane of the moon, when that 328 days comes around, then you're going to get roughly the same transfer. So yeah, so that's basically the transfer window. I've gone over a little bit of what this pork chop thing means as well. But yeah, that was number 7. So I guess this one is pretty self-explanatory. Test everything in Krash. And now the reason why I say that is there are so many different parts that make up a rocket, especially in Realism Overhaul. You wouldn't want to get to, say, the moon and discover that you've not got deep space avionics. I should have told myself that before sending the crew of Clog Crew 1. See? Don't do as I do as I say, or whatever it is that they say. But yes, no, test absolutely everything in Krash. And the reason why I am now on the Bonnie Ellis wing, which is something that we are going to be sending to the Carnasa Lunar Orbital Gateway later on. I think I'm going to do this on live stream at some point soon. Basically, I have realized from testing in Krash that if we go up here, these Aerosine NTO RCS thrusters aren't Aerosine and NTO thrusters. Nope, they're configured to nitrogen. And because I tested this in Krash, I was able to find out before I launched this thing. And now that I've done that, hopefully nothing else should go wrong. I tested everything else and everything else seemed to work fine. Actually, I do need to make the ejection power on these a little bit more. But aside from that, no, everything else worked fine. And what I mean by testing everything is in Krash. Test every single part of the mission. Ideally, you want to do it where you are going to be sending the mission. So I did kind of test the Clog crew, but I didn't test it around the moon, which is why I didn't catch the fact that the deep space avionics didn't work. If I had tested that in Krash around the moon, then we would have been fine, and James Peters, Bonnie Ellis, and Ellen Cox would still be alive today. But they're not. So I honestly can't stress enough how important it is to test everything. And that is actually going to bring me on to point number 9. So I don't know how you feel about this, but this is something that I do, and You can see, so this is the rocket that I just mentioned about testing. And the only reason why I've got this in a test again is just to highlight how ridiculous costs are. So we've had this on the launch pad for all of about 20 seconds, and our costs are already now 12,500 and going up 200 almost every single second. That is a ludicrous amount of money. And this is a big rocket, but there are going to be missions that are going to cost more than this and will end up costing you a lot more. So what I like to do is I do just like to completely turn Krash costs off. However, there are configs for it where it's balanced for RP1, and I think you can find that on the RP1 GitHub. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm fairly sure that's where they can be found. But just to make things simple, I just like turning them off, and it will save you a lot of headaches because these things are ridiculously expensive and you will end up bankrupting yourself, especially if you follow the last tip and test absolutely everything. And lastly, I guess you could call this one a little bit of a cop-out, but I was struggling to actually find a 10th one to talk about. So yeah, how much time I've sunk. So I only started playing Realism Overhaul in June last year. But boy, believe me, since I have downloaded it, it's the only version of KSP I play. It is so addictive. It is so time consuming. There is so much to think about. It's great. It's educational. You learn so much. And it's really fun at the end of the day. So I guess what I want to say here is a massive thank you to all of the developers that have worked on RP1 and Realism Overhaul. You have given me a lot of enjoyment over the past year. And yeah, it's fantastic. And if you haven't already tried it out, I highly, highly recommend you do. And that's another thing. I hope this video, these 10 tips, have helped you should you decide to try out RP1 and Realism Overhaul. But anyway, that is going to be the end of this video, and I'm sorry it ended on a bit of a weird one, but if you have enjoyed this video, why not give it a like if you have really enjoyed this video and would like to keep up with the content on my channel. Please do consider subscribing. I've been Carnasa, and I will see you later.